Great. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I don't know about the rest of you. I feel like because it's sunny, I have a little more energy tonight than normal. Normally, I'm like, I'm so tired. It's time to be getting ready for bed. So, I don't feel quite as drained tonight. I hope you're the same. Um, let's see. I was just going to go over a quick review of some of the things we talked about in this portion of Math Leads, which is school leadership. We talked about power dynamics and leadership styles, choosing your team. We did a session on values, mission, vision, goals. What was it last time? I think it was 2 times ago. We talked about your entry plan, getting your project started, and thinking about the people you were working with. So having a reflective cycle, are they in that unaware stage, that conscious stage, and that skill will matrix. So if you're having trouble getting your change enacted, especially with people, is it a skill issue? Is it a will issue? Is it both? What's happening? And oh yes, last time we talked about filtering decisions, looking through lenses, and systems thinking. So and building relationships. That was a big part of last week too. So today we're going to talk a little bit about organizational change. So we'll get into that. There's so much on that that I felt overwhelmed paring it down to what I have here. But we'll talk about internal and external influencers to change in your schools, change models, and strategies to implement change. Before we go on, I want to just real quickly have everyone share in just 1 to 3 sentences your project. I know a lot of you have shared with each other, maybe in a small group or in partners, but I think it might be good to just share real briefly so that we can kind of have that context as we go through tonight. So I'm just going to call on people and you can unmute yourself and tell us in 1 to 3 sentences what your project is. Let's start with Lori.
So my project is using games, math games for students to improve their fact fluency.
And how about Pat?
I am blending or aligning the state standards with the Singapore or Dimensions math curriculum that we have at the school for grades 3 through 8.
Okay. Thank you. Melissa.
Okay, I've been working on like researching CFAs that are more instead of procedural based, more like conceptually based, and then sharing that with my team during PD time or our PLC time. So then hopefully it kind of carries out to the whole school, but I'm not quite to that step yet.
Okay. Thank you. Karen, can you share?
Yeah, I am working on fact fluency also, but not just games. I've done a lot of just kind of sharing with my teachers what the research says and that there's other options besides doing minute math and things like that. So training them that there are other ways.
Okay, thank you. How about Justine?
Danny and I are working together to work on best practices and using them in small groups in math, doing PD for our staff.
Okay. And Charity, I know you just logged in. We're just sharing our projects in 1 to 3 sentences just to hear where we all are for some context. If you want to unmute and share yours.
We just started implementing our math pass, the colleague and I that I've been working with, and she's like so excited. She's loving it, and the goal is to get kids talking and thinking. So I think we're going in the right direction.
Excellent. Did I miss anyone? I know Danielle, I think Danielle, are you with?
Yeah, Justine and I are together.
Okay, all right, so speak up if I missed anyone. So, okay, great. That gives us some context going forward. All right, so this says change is inevitable, growth is optional. Something just to keep in mind, because we're going to be talking a lot about change and change in your schools and change in organizations. Last month, one of the last slides I showed was this, and we talked about systems thinking and having that broader vision of what you're doing is impacting a system. And so I wanted to start here today, kind of in this same place. And so if we talk about change, so we're talking a little bit more on a system level, at the very least, a school's your individual school, but maybe on a greater system. We could talk about there's change can be caused by something internal and something external. So with your projects, what you're really toying with is approaching organizational change. So that's what we're talking about today. And I just want to start with some general notes about organizational change. So like I was saying, there could be internal and external, meaning the change is triggered by something internal and something external. So let's think first about internal. Internal meaning within the organization, within the school. Can anyone think of a change that might be triggered from something internal? And this could be a change. You can think of any change that's happened at your school, and maybe if it started from something internal, someone inside the organization starting it.
Picking a math curriculum. I mean, that came from the administration, internal.
That's what I was thinking about when I was thinking of an example. I was thinking of maybe a curriculum adoption. Okay, so there's this idea that change begins and ends with external environments. So change is triggered, change ends by something outside the organization. So this idea is that all change is pretty much caused by external forces. So my question is, do you agree or disagree with this statement? And you can
I
actually
do.
go ahead. I was gonna say unmute and talk.
I do and I don't, because I think a lot of times, and it's an external factor that um, triggers that internal desire to make a change. But I also think that the internal part to me is more important, because if you don't have a desire for change to happen, it's not going to happen. Am I on the right page?
There's not really, I'm not looking for right or wrong. I'm just looking for what do you agree or disagree? So I like it though. What else? Who else has a thought on that?
Well, I think a lot of times that change does begin externally before you internalize it. If you hear an idea, it comes from the outside, but then I bring it in and internalize it and share it within my community of learners or staff.
And I'm thinking about Pat, what he said, his change, curriculum adoption. Probably someone in the school, you're saying administration made that choice, but was there an external factor that led to that? Or, yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I guess the external factor would be the I'm trying to remember. I think I know part of it was the scores over the course of, I think, 5 years were continuing to drop. So would that count as an external factor or?
I would think kind of that outside pressure. I doubt the administrator just woke up one day and said, you know what, I feel like a new curriculum. I'm gonna go check this out. So there's probably some type, maybe it was all internal, especially if it's like maybe an independent school and they're not accountable to take state test scores or something, but even then, they're independent, they're tuition based, they have to bring in clientele, they have to bring in students and families. So it's just something interesting to think about is how our external environments impact internal changes. So what might be some of those things that influence system changes? Things, anything from the outside that makes a change inside your school?
Legislator, the state.
Legislation, definitely.
I was just thinking like our benchmarking and monitoring program. We had iReady, but then the state said they weren't using that one anymore. So if we wanted to continue using iReady, we would have to pay. Or if we're going to, and then they did offer one for free, but inside we decided to pick another one. So that was something coming from the outside because switching that assessment program is a pain in the neck.
Mhm.
So without the external influence, we probably wouldn't have done it.
I'll just keep going here. So some of the things, so budget, that's part of what you were talking about there is budget. They took away the budget for that and that impacted your internal systems policy, that legislation, right? Time, sometimes we don't have time for something and it needs to change or we reallocate time. Beliefs, sometimes people just have beliefs, ideally change and things that we're doing in school is based on research, but a lot of times it's beliefs and values. Sometimes it's tradition. This is the way it was when I did this. It worked. This is the way we should do it. This is the way we always do it around here. Something like that. So here's another statement that I want to know. Do you agree or disagree with this and why? So this says external environments, so things outside your organization, change much more quickly than organizations. So we're thinking, do our schools keep up with the pace of change of our society? That's another way we could look at that, frame that in our context. What do you think? Agree, disagree?
I feel like I can see it both ways. Like in some ways, like for math facts, for example, we kind of have an idea that learning them the way that we did probably really isn't the best way. And so I think some of those changes that are happening within the school are changing quicker than out in the community.
Interesting. All right, I'm gonna let you think about that. All right, a couple notes. So I'm gonna go through this kind of list of things to think about in organizational change. And I want you to think about it in the context of your project. And you're going to kind of go through this checklist at the end of this briefly with a partner. So change is systemic. We talked about the systems, and one change will likely cause more changes. So you want to think about this in your project. What am I doing that might cause another change? Okay, change can occur both radically or incrementally. So there's whole books dedicated to this topic. There's minor changes and major. I would bet the farm all of your changes are minor that you're instigating through your projects. And that's 95% of changes. Sometimes they're called incrementally, first order, or evolutionary. The opposite of that is radically, second order, revolutionary. But in general, almost all change that happens in organizations, in schools, is incrementally. And if you look at this, it's like it's an extension of the past. It's not a break from the past, right? It's within existing paradigms and beliefs, not outside of that. Okay, it's consistent with norms and values, it's little steps. Its existing knowledge and skills requires new knowledge and skills, which I think is interesting because this is a lot, can really cross over into a lot of the work that you're doing, is maybe this teachers needing new knowledge and skills. So another note, change can cause short-term anger, frustration, or resentment. Can anyone think of a change that's happened in your workplace or your organization that caused anger, frustration, resentment? I can tell you, I know when, speaking of adopting curriculums, that when I was teaching and there was a curriculum change that caused some frustration because I wasn't familiar with it. And it took me a while. I mean, we say short term, it probably took me 2 years to be like, okay, I guess I kind of like part of this, to get on board. And this is important to remember, whatever change you're implementing, you might run into some of this with your project. But ideally, it's short term, and as behavior changes, and then they see the output, oh, there's some benefit to this, it's this cycle where it gets less and less frustrating, and there's more buy-in. Change could be messy, confusing, and part of what you need to do is keep that end in mind. So that's why we talked about values, mission, goals. Stick to those when you're like, why are we even doing this? This is a nightmare, right? Always going back to those values, those mission and goals. And this is what we talked about when we did that is own your why and how. This was from a previous session. Provide those guiding principles. Communicate with stakeholders. We'll talk a little more about that. Make sure you have a unifying goal and rely on your values, mission, goals in trying times. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to put these in the chat and you'll want to open that. And I want you to, we're going to partner you up. Let me find my Zoom here. Stop screen share. There we go. I'm going to partner you up and just go, you're going to kind of do an inventory. Go through these things with your partner, and I'm only just maybe 2 minutes each. So do it kind of quickly and see how these relate to your project. And so go ahead and click the link I just put in the chat, or it's also on the navigation guide. And then I'll put you in the breakout rooms. Why can't I find breakout rooms? Let's see here. Maybe April or Angie will put everyone in a breakout room. I don't know why I can't find my breakout rooms.
Angie, can you do it? I'm also looking for breakout rooms and not seeing them.
Interesting. Let me see. Yes, I can. How many do you want in a group?
Just partners.
Okay.
We got to share some of that, reflect on your project a bit. And for time's sake, we're gonna keep trucking along here. Okay, so there's a lot with change that could be difficult. You'll get resistance, but change is inevitable. And so thinking about how change happens, how to implement it can be really valuable, even in implementing a small project. So there's a lot of different change models. I'm gonna just share one briefly tonight. This is called Lewin's change model. It's an old one, but it's probably the most well-known. And I like it because it's simple. There's 3 phrases which show, they say unfreeze, change, refreeze. So basically what you do is you determine what needs to change. And if you look at your system as it's frozen, this is the way we always do things, nothing changes. You're going to pick something and unfreeze it. We're going to change the way that that's kind of been done. And there's sort of some steps here. Ensure there's leadership support, create the need. So even if you see the need, but others don't, you might need to create that urgency. Understand concerns. Then you're going to make the change. I like this one, dispel rumors. A lot of this is managing people that we talked about last week. And then after you get there, you refreeze. We kind of might think like, why do we want to refreeze this? didn't we just unfreeze it? But the idea is that you want the change to stay. You want it to be sustainable. So if you do your project, the change is enacted, you leave in a year or two, will that change still be there? And so that's the idea, is putting things in to keep it in place. So what is something you can do to hope that that change is still there? And so ideally, your project is in this change or refreeze stage. And when you get to this change, you're like, yep, I implemented the change, it's going well. The next thing you can think about is, okay, how can I freeze this? How can I keep this change? How can I make sure that this stays, assuming that it's all going well? Okay, oops, wrong way. All right, and then when you're in kind of that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all of those, this is kind of wrapping this all up. It's kind of putting everything together that we talked about tonight, a little bit from our other sessions, is Todd Whitaker wrote a book called Leading School Change, and it's a short read. It's very practical. So it's something, if you continue down this route as a leader in mathematics, a school leader, and you're having trouble getting some initiative, getting a change, getting teachers to move forward, this is a great quick read that you can look at and give you some advice. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to put this link in, and we'll just spend, I don't think we'll even go in breakout rooms. I'll probably give you 2-3 minutes. And these are out of order. And see if you could put these in the order of the way the author suggests. Like, first, this is the first thing you need to do when you're implementing school change. This is the second thing you need to do. This is the third. So you can kind of copy and paste. But when you open this document, please make a copy of it. And then you can edit it and change it all you want. So let me stop share, put this in the chat, and give you a few minutes, and then we'll chat about it. It's also in the navigation guide if you have that. So Todd Whitaker kind of came up with 9 steps of how to lead school change, which is essentially what your project is on a little bit smaller scale. Some of them are larger. Like Pat, you were saying, you were talking about, is this curriculum thing first order, second order? It could definitely bleed over into that second order. So, all right, make a copy of this and give you just a couple minutes, and then we'll wrap up my section. All right, before we go to, actually, I'll just go to the next one. So this is the order Todd Whitaker suggests. Without reading it, it can be a little bit tricky. I know at the bottom it says, make sure the change matters. I would almost think you'd want to do that first. But he kind of threw it in there at the end. But were there any of these? You could check this against what you did. And I don't even know if this is the way maybe I would do all of it. And some of them you might not understand, like find the entry points. But I'll go over them briefly, and then you can kind of, I'm wondering if there were any that kind of stuck out. So identify the change. That seems like a great place to start. Make the first exposure great. I like that because it's kind of like you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So making whatever that change is the first time great. Determine who matters. So think about those stakeholders. This is almost the political part. Who do you need to get on board? Who's going to be impacted by this, putting those lenses on, and find those entry points is really using what you know about the people, those relationships you've built, to leverage that. So what he suggests in this is a lot of, if you have early adopter teachers, you have very enthusiastic teachers, that's who you're going to kind of go to first to help you with this. You're not going to go to the teacher that's 1 year from retirement and doesn't ever want to change anything they've done in 40 years. Thinking the idea is if you find those, you can get a few on board and then it will spread. He has a whole chapter on how to reduce resistance if there is some. I I harness the power of emotion, but really it's diminish fear. Because when people don't want to change, most of that is from fear. And a lot of it is just self-preservation and self-protection. They are, I don't know how to do this. This is hard. This is going to make me look bad. I can't teach this way. And so what can you do to diminish that fear? And this one, look past buy-in to action. It's really easy to get buy-in. Okay, it's kind of easy to get buy-in, not so easy to get action. How many times have we tried to help, in your experience leading math, getting someone to do something and they're like, yeah, this sounds great. And then you never see that follow-up action. Reinforce change behaviors. That doesn't mean like, you get a candy bar if you did it. It's more, how can we support them? And how can we support them with maybe professional development, but also support them with just positive support too, and then fit it all together. So were there any of these that either you have questions about or that stood out to you that you liked, that you didn't like, you weren't sure of? We're almost done with my section. So if someone shares, we'll be able to move on pretty quickly.
I actually was wondering about the book. Like, does it have other stuff in it? Or your thoughts on the book?
This is the book, and it is pretty much a chapter. These are the 9 chapters in there. So it goes into much more detail on it, but that's the whole thing is how to lead school change. Because it's a challenge. There's so many things that we've talked about, right? About change and leadership. And so, yeah, it just goes in. I mean, it's also only 125 pages. And so if it's interesting at all to you, it's easy to read.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. I wouldn't say I agreed with 100% of it, but I like books that are practical too, and this is really practical. It's like you can approach a teacher this way, talk to him about this, like here's how you can kind of, when he talks about find those entry points, he'll tell you kind of exactly how to do that. So, yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Last part is a little bit of a one-off, but if you're having any resistance, communicate that message, your why, your mission, and communicate it again, and communicate it again, and communicate it again. That repeated exposure is one of the easiest things you can do that has a lot of return on it. So hopefully what we talked about today relates to your project and some of the changes you're making, some of the challenges you might face, maybe not, maybe in the future, and talking about those external environments and the different reasons we change and the challenges we face. And I think that's the end of my section. And I'm gonna pass that over because I might be over time, so.
Oh, no, I think we're doing good. So we're just going to get in and do a little bit of math and kind of play for a moment. So we're going to start off. The tool that we're going to need is some graph paper. And so on the chat or navigation guide, there's a link to a printable graph paper you can, if you want, or there's also a virtual one. And so let me share my screen and I'll kind of give a quick tutorial of how to navigate this virtual graph paper. And I'm not going to go into all the parts of it, but basically you can pick, whether you want a line, a curve, rectangle, circle, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and pick rectangle. And then if you slide over to the right side of the screen, this stroke is the color that you would like the outside of this shape to be. And then of course we could look at the fill, and that's what color we would like the fill to be. If you look down here in the bottom left-hand corner, it'll kind of give you the instructions for what to do next. So if I'm going to try and make a rectangle, I'm just going to click and then I can start I'm not even holding my mouse down. I'm just dragging it around and then click where I would like my rectangle to end. If I want to make another rectangle, I can add like another fill if I wanted. And then once again, just click where I want it to start and then drag and click where I want it to end. So I want to give you just a few minutes to 60 seconds, just kind of explore and play with this graph paper really quick, get a little bit familiar with it, see some of the different things it can do. And then we'll start on our task in just a moment. And then over on the bottom right hand side, that menu there, you can clear it all out, redo, undo, start a whole new page, whatever you would like.
Can you move the shape once you've drawn it?
Not that I have figured out. So no, yeah, when I was playing around with it, I wasn't able to do that. That doesn't mean you can't, I just did not figure out how. There's about 10 more seconds, feel okay. Did you figure it out, Charity?
Yes, you select and then you kind of highlight it. And then there's one that says move. You can
Oh,
also flip and rotate. So lots of cool stuff.
perfect, thank you. So give me a thumbs up when you think you've had enough time to kind of explore. If you have any other questions, throw those out. All right, well, let's go ahead then and go on to our task that we're going to do. Maybe we'll get there. Okay. So just right now on our own, we're just going to stay in kind of a whole group, but with your graph paper, you've got Kate and she's making a pattern of squares. She starts with 1 square and then adds 3 more squares and then 5 more squares and so on. So go ahead and draw out what you think the next shape in Kate's pattern would be. All right. So how many new squares did you add and what size square did we end up making? And in just a minute, we're going to go into breakout rooms, but I kind of want to get through this first little section before we do that. So who has an idea of how many more squares you added? And what was the size of that square?
I added 7 more and got 4 by 4.
Okay. Anybody get anything different? I'm thinking probably not. So in chat, there's a link to the rest of this odd numbered task that we're going to be playing with. Before we go into breakout rooms though, I want to give you about 2 minutes. Go ahead and work through numbers 1 through 4. And here it is as well. Kind of work through this independent for just a couple of minutes, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms and have the opportunity to kind of share our thoughts and what we were doing and thinking. So either in chat or on your fingers, can you show me what number you're on, whether you're on 2 or 3 or 4, and about where you're at? It'll help me kind of gauge. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Melissa. Maybe about 30 more seconds, and then we'll go into breakout rooms. And even if you're not done, not a problem. All right, so when we go into our breakout rooms, compare your work with the partners in your room. You know, did you come up with the same way? Did you even have the same strategies for solving, or how did you think about this? And if you need some guiding questions to kind of help you along, you can use any of these here. You know, what stayed constant, what was changing, what structures did you notice, any relationships that you noticed, generalizations. Is there a relationship between the figure number and the value? And if so, what is that? And these questions are also on the navigation guide if you want to refer back to them to help you with your discussion. But yeah, we'll do this for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back together and get ready for the next section of our task. So breakout rooms should be open. Okay. Well, thank you for now that we've kind of had a chance to explore this task and see some different ways to think about it. We're actually going to look at some student work. And in chat, I've put the link to 4 samples of student work, and take a moment. We're going to go back into breakout rooms in a little bit, but take a moment, individually analyze, take whatever time you need individually to kind of analyze what the students are doing and what they're thinking, and then have a discussion together. But think of it, be more of like an asset based, looking for, you know, what do these students have? What do they understand? Looking for the positives and the things that they're doing that way. So let's go ahead and shift back out into, come on now, where's my screen? There we go. Go back into breakout rooms. Give yourself some time to independently kind of think through what things are, what's happening here, and then share out.
What grade was this, April?
That's a really good question. I'll have to think.
Maybe third?
Ah, I will have to think on that. I'll do that.
Copyright on the bottom of the page says grade 7.
I think it was more of a 6th, 7th, 8th grade task. Yeah. Yep. All right. There you go. So we just have about 1 or 2 minutes, but looking at that student thinking, was there anything that just really popped out to you or that you found interesting about what they were doing and seeing? Or any kind of wonderings like what's going on here?
I feel like I talk all the time. I'm sorry. I just feel like we should share, you know? I was kind of talking to Justine, and we kind of thought this was lower level math for 7th graders, or at least I did. If they were 6th or 7th graders, I thought they would, you know, see more multiplication patterns, and maybe not the square root, but like Justine noticed that 2 times 2 is 4, and the 3 plus the 1 make the 4, especially where they had the visual of the squares. That's all we talked about. I thought it was odd that they really focused on the repeated addition.
Yeah. Huh. Missing some of that, looking for that structure and those generalizations and patterns that you can make. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that each number, like 1 is a 1 by 1, the 3 is a 2 by 2. It's the second number, it's a 2 by 2. The third number is a 3 by 3. None of them. Oh, actually, just kidding. The one on the left bottom did. No, maybe not. No, they didn't. I lied.
Oh, I was on that far right side, maybe. Seemed like they were trying to get it.
It said 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, but it was just adding the numbers.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right. There was a little bit of a discussion in Pat's group on that far right sample where they just were going down the side of the page, 1 plus 3 is 4 plus 5 plus 9 is, all of that. And just a little bit of like, well, I think Pat was saying, maybe doing that is what helped them to figure out how to do on the left side of the page, how to write out those equations and those multiples that way. So it was kind of hard to know which way did the student think of this first and which impacted how they thought about it, or did they try one way and then see a more efficient way to go about looking at it? It's also interesting to think about that, 1 plus 3 does equal 4, but it doesn't equal 4 plus 5. And so a little bit of a misconception on there, working on that. Anyway. Well, thank you for playing with that task and kind of digging in and doing a little bit of math. But now we'll get over to Angie and get going into our projects a little bit. And I think really making these real and doable and not so overwhelming, because that's easy for us to do.
All right, so I'm gonna just have all my tabs. Where are the slides? Give me just a second. All right, I tell you what, April, do you mind just sharing your screen? Just go ahead and start. It'll take less time to have you click than me find it. Oh, Justine. I wonder if Justine's had some power outages. I'm wondering if you're the only one.
I think my whole building went out in the street across because their dog started going crazy too.
Oh, wow.
So if I disappear again, it's because my power shut itself off again.
I hear ya. No, it's like April said, it's life, right? That's how It just hits us. Okay, so for our Math Leads projects, we're winding down. We need to start finalizing, working backwards. In June, was it June that we decided or May that they're sharing?
I'm certain it was June.
It has to be June.
Okay, good. You're all panicking, going, nope, it was June. It was June. It had to be June. Okay, so working backwards, in June, at our meeting, you'll be split into partners, and with as few as are here now, you'll probably all share out with each other. And April has created a template presentation for you to share your project and your learning and your outcomes. So by May 20th, and you'll see all of these dates on the navigation guide. April, if you could skip it 2-3 slides ahead. One more. Okay, in the next steps, I'm kind of going a little backwards than how I originally created it. That's okay. I live backwards. So we're going backwards here. And let me get my pen. So in June, you're going to present. So working backwards, by the 20th, I actually need everything completed except your presentation. I need the project part and the project document completed. I have to get started on processing your stipends. So our contract ends at the end of June, and it's always a nightmare to get these done. So the admin piece is a pain in my behind. So by the 20th, your presentation doesn't have to be complete. That's why we're having this gap. You can work on your presentation between the 20th and the 12th, but I need all of this stuff completed by the 20th. So just to, in fact, I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Just to give you a reminder, if you, let's see, do you see my screen? What screen do you see? Congratulations or the notes?
The logic model.
Next
Or
step.
not the logic model, the navigation guide.
Oh,
The
good.
navigation guide. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so if we look at the navigation guide, this document, the complete PD plan, needs to be completed. If you need help inserting your logic document as like an image, I can help with that. You can send those two pieces separately and I'll just pull it in. But all of these white spaces here need to be detailed out. So if you need an example, in here, there is the recording right here that walks through each of the parts and pieces and what it should look like. There's an example one right here. That's not it. Where's the example one? Oh, it's in the handbook. So in the handbook, there's an example completed one. And I'll show you if we scroll down, example LeaDs project. So there's her logic model, there's the data analysis, her goals, here it was called theoretical perspective. We called it applying your research. So some of the reading that you did or studying you did to learn about your topic. The implementation plan, and then evaluating the data. What did you do? What did you collect? What did the data tell you? Whether it was a survey, whether you compared, like, how do you know that you affected change? And then any resources and materials can be attached at the end. If you have, I have time. So if you ever want to have some one-on-one help, we can jump on Zoom real quick or shoot me an email and we'll find time to jump on Zoom. Are there any questions about what needs to be completed? I should put this also here. I need to, and it doesn't have to, a log doesn't have to be in super detail. But I do need to document the time that you've spent working on this. So there is an example, but you don't have to use that example. All right, any questions on what's needed from here to the end? By the way, we've got the funds for 1,000 each for the stipend. So yay, happy June. That wasn't much of a celebration. I'm like, there you go, Karen. That's better. I'm like, I think $1,000. Yeah. All right. No questions then? Do you feel like you understand it? You just need to do it. Is that kind of the right interpretation?
Do we have to register for credit to get the stipend?
You do not. You don't have to. It's available if you want it. And it's the same requirements. So you can get the credit for what you've been doing and also get the stipend.
Is it
And
one
how-
credit?
What's that?
Is it just one credit?
I believe it's either 2 or 3. I think it was
Says
2, but
2 on the
I
top
think
of
it
the
was
thing.
2. Pat, what were you gonna ask?
the presentation, can you just go over like time and like what you'd like us to specifically present?
Sure. I know. Let me just pull that real quick. Let me stop sharing real quick and I will.
Is the outline you said April, is that available already, or will that be, has that not been sent to us yet? The outline for the presentation? Didn't you say April was giving us an outline?
Thought we had sent it out. Let me go back and double check really quick.
And I'm pulling up our notes real quick on what we created recently.
Okay, I think I found it here.
The majority of it just aligns right with the project document. So, I mean, the simplest thing, she's finding it, but it aligns with it. The presentation prompts, in fact, we have presentation prompts right here, and I will put that right in the navigation guide as a resource to be thinking about.
Will this all also be on the website to go back to?
I will make sure it's on it.
Sweet, thank you.
If it's not, I will make it happen. Because I know the editor. Yeah, that's me. Okay, so if you refresh your navigation guide, you should be able to see some of the discussion prompts that we came up with. And then we will make sure we find the time to send you out just a template. Okay, any other questions before we go to our discussion piece? Okay, April, would you mind sharing your slides again? And go to the discussion one. So we're gonna take about 10 minutes and I'm gonna put you in groups of probably 2 to 3. I think that's how it pairs out. The information on this slide is also on the navigation guide. Talk about each part. If you want to pull open your logic model, the hyperlink is right there in the Math Leads project light blue box, open logic model. With your team, you're going to talk about the inputs, the activities, the outputs, the outcomes. There's some guiding questions to guide your conversation, to get feedback from each other, to explain what you've done, to think about what you need to do. At the end of the 10 minutes, I'm going to give you 5 minutes of independent time to go into your logic model and add additional thoughts, pieces, continue to work on it. So you have 10 minutes to talk with some colleagues. Any questions about that? Okay, I'm opening up the rooms. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to have you go to your logic model. If you need that link, I just put it in the chat bar. April's going to hit start for 5 minutes. I want you to go into your own logic model and add parts and pieces to complete it based on what you were talking about. And if you feel like yours is complete and you don't need to add anything, then you can move to the exit ticket. So April, go ahead and hit start on that timer. And please go into your logic model. I don't know. Oh, I do know what that was. It was the funky music on the timer.
Music from the timer, yes.
It's weird. It threw me off earlier today too. So take 5 minutes and go add to your logic model. If you've done nothing, now's your time. If you've done everything, then maybe start making some notes about your presentation or your next step, but I'll give you 5 minutes.
Hey, Angie, if I email you the Talk Moves checklist that you created that April shared with me, there's 2 sections on here that are exactly the same. The repeating and the revising your thinking, like the text underneath them is exactly the same. I'm not sure if is it supposed to be? Let me email it to you and then you tell me.
Yeah, let me see.
Okay. Let's see. I'm just going to email you this whole thing.
Sure.
Oh, message too large. Maybe I'm not.
All right, we're going to put a pin in it really quickly. We're going to pause and just do some closing information. April, go ahead. Thank you. So if you haven't done so, please complete the exit ticket. This is really good information. After our May 1, we're actually going to ask you to do an end of year survey. It'll be on your own time. You took it at the beginning of the year. This is a way for us to kind of study the impact of what we're doing and what we're having and how we can make it better. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to do these exit surveys, even though they're probably like roll your eyes. Also, we're hoping that you're continuing with us next year. The book we've selected this year is called The Math Pact. There's an elementary, middle school, and high school version. I pulled from prior year's lists. I was pretty sure we knew which book you needed, and they've already been sent. So you actually get them before the end of the year. They were sent last year. If you have not gotten them in the next week or so, let me know and we'll figure out. If we accidentally sent you the wrong one, let me know and we'll fix it. I think you're gonna like this. On the navigation guide, if you scroll down, I added the handout. I believe our admin put an insert in the envelope, but it's the same book study structure. Is you'll be grouped with people of your same grade band to discuss these books, and we'll go into that a little bit more next month. Jennifer, did you have a question?
Yeah, what's the name of your admin?
Her name is Amy Levitt.
AMY?
Yes.
Amy McGarry? Or is that a
Yes.
different person?
Yep,
Okay.
that's her maiden name.
Okay, I just wanted to check and find the email from her and make sure that I had actually replied.
Good. Yeah, she should have reached out just to confirm that your addresses had stayed the same or changed so that she could send that out. So she had said she'd heard from everybody. But we got on it way early this year. So before we go for the night, any final thoughts or questions? All right. You
So
guys
what
have a
will
great
next
night.
year look like?
What's that?
After the book study, what will next year look like?
So your project will actually be this year's learning curve on the whole LeaDs project. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to set the goal. You're going to have the logic model kind of and analyze it. You can build on the project that you did this year. You can expand it. You can change it. You can go a different direction. That'll be your call. The learning piece, the monthly meetings, we're still refining that. If you have suggestions or ideas, we'd love to hear them. Like, I really would like to learn more about this, or I'd really like to focus in on this. We're right in the process of determining what that year 3 learning piece is, but the project itself is exactly the same. So you should be more efficient. You have a better handle on what it is. Other questions? Okay. Well, y'all have a good night.